Hey friends, it's Miss Perez, your online art teacher over at Centennial. I hope you're all doing well and staying safe. Today I'm coming at you from my favorite place in my home, my bookshelves. I'm also waiting on a package to turn up, so... Oh, well there it is. Let's check it out. Come on. Hey look, it's from the chickens.
Postcards from chickens, searching the world for fine art. Postcards from chickens, hope we get a letter today.
It's from the chickens. Before I open this up, can I just say how impressed Mr. Willyerd and I were with the images turned in from the Getty Museum Challenge? 5th and 6th grade totally killed it on all the recreations of the artwork you guys all found. We appreciate you sharing it with us. Keep up the good work. Okay, now on to our package. Oh, no postcard this time. Probably because we got a package. But there is a letter.
Dear Miss Perez, we came home with the snowbirds for a bit of time in the sunshine here in Arizona. Birds of a feather, you know. While we were here spending some time with our winter visitors, we made an appointment at the Burton Bar Public Library in downtown Phoenix to visit the rare book room. We were able to see many types of handmade books from all over the globe, and so many years older than we could have ever imagined. Many of these books were made using a variety of materials, including the collection called Illuminated Manuscripts. While the process made us a bit uncomfortable for our barnyard friends, it made us very grateful for the discovery of paper. Anyway, you should check it out. The pages of these books were beautiful. Until next time, the chickens.
That explains the packaging. Illuminated manuscripts are beautiful, and the process in which they're made is very interesting. And I think my favorite are the illuminated letters inside a manuscript. How about we check some stuff out on manuscripts and talk a little bit more about illuminated letters? Let's talk about illuminated manuscripts. So, for starters, what is an illuminated manuscript? Manuscript means handwritten. It comes from the Latin words manus and scriptus, which manus is hand. You know a little bit Spanish. Mano is also hand. And scriptus is written, kind of like script. The letters on the many pages were often embellished with a metallic leaf, what we sometimes call gold leaf, or some sort of paint that shimmered in the light, which gives us the term illuminated, as if it were glowing. Here we have a video where we're going to talk more about making manuscripts. It comes from our friends, actually, at the Getty Museum. Check this out.
In the Middle Ages, parchment was used to make the pages of books. Parchment was made from the skins of animals. The transition from a fresh skin to a surface suitable for writing was a slow and laborious process. The parchment maker selected skins of sheep, goats, or calves. Skins were soaked in lime water for 3 to 10 days to loosen the animal's hair. The parchment maker then scraped away the hair and any remaining flesh. After this, the skin was soaked in fresh water to remove the lime and then stretched tightly on a frame. A special rounded knife was used to scrape the hide to the desired thickness. The process of scraping continued over the course of several days. During this time, the parchment maker continually tightened the tension on the stretching frame while the skin dried. The result was parchment, a smooth and durable material that could last over 1,000 years. Before parchment could be written on, it had to be specially prepared. First, the parchment was rubbed with pumice powder to roughen the surface, and then dusted with a sticky powder. These steps made the surface receptive to inks and colors. The whole finished skin was then cut down to the size of the pages needed for a particular book. A big manuscript was assembled from sheets almost as large as a single skin. For smaller books, the skin was cut into 2 or more pieces. The parchment sheets were folded and nested to make gatherings, usually of 16 or 20 pages. The vibrant illuminations in a medieval manuscript often overshadow the words on the page, yet the writing of the script was as important as the painting of the images. The tools of a scribe, the person who copied the text onto the page, were simple. Pens, called quills, were made from the feathers of a bird, which were soaked in water, dried, and hardened with heated sand. The scribe carved the quill to a rough point, cut a slit to draw ink down, then trimmed the point to the proper width. The shape of the quill point varied with the style of the lettering being copied. Scribes made ink from a variety of materials. Gallnuts, growths found on oak trees, were often used to create a dark black ink. Black ink was also made by dissolving a common carbon substance. The resulting ink was called lampblack. Before the scribe began writing, he ruled the parchment using a straight edge. Medieval scribes and their patrons prized a regular and elegant script. If a scribe made an error, he would scratch it out with a penknife. Because the page was made from parchment, which was very resilient, it could stand many erasures of this type. An illuminator decorated the pages of a manuscript using paint and precious metals. He began only after a scribe had finished copying the text. The illuminator first sketched his design, then added details, such as the features of a figure or the interlacing of a decorated initial. Thin sheets of precious metals, like gold leaf, were always applied first. The illuminator put down a base coat, consisting of either a plaster-like substance called gesso or a gum, as shown here. Once the gum base dried, the moisture in the illuminator's breath was enough to make the small piece of gold leaf stick to the page. Then the illuminator brushed away the excess and polished the gold leaf. After applying the gold leaf, the illuminator painted his design. Each color was made from a vegetable dye or a mineral substance ground up and dissolved in liquid. The illuminator applied the paler shades first, then the darker tones. Once the illuminator applied black outlines and delicate white highlights to the figures and vines, the illumination was finished. After the scribes and illuminators had finished writing and decorating the parchment pages, the manuscript was bound. Groups of folded sheets of parchment, called gatherings, were sewn together with strong linen thread onto flexible supports, such as these narrow leather thongs. Next, the binder attached end bands, which secured the top and bottom ends of the pages in the spine of the book. The binder then laced the leather thongs along the spine through channels and tunnels, which had been carved into wood boards. These boards were the covers of the manuscript. The thongs could be held in place by wood pegs or iron nails. The volume was then covered, usually with leather. Without pressure from the covers to keep the leaves flat, parchment expanded and contracted with changes in temperature and humidity. Pressure was applied by the addition of clasps or straps, which held the book closed. The binding of a manuscript could be decorated with any one of a variety of materials. A manuscript might be covered with leather, stamped or tooled with gold, or covered with silks or velvets. The most elaborate bindings received sculpted decoration made from precious metals. The materials of the binding depended on the wealth of the patron, the type of manuscript, and its intended use.
So as you can see, making manuscripts, or just books in general, was a pretty laborious process. There was a lot of work that went into it and a lot of craftsmanship. The way they made the parchment, the manner in which they painted, and all of these things were done by a variety of people who all came together to create this one book. And it's all handwritten. It's pretty incredible. Maybe we talk a little bit more about what our next project is going to be. But first, I think it's important to look at some really specific examples of illuminated letters. Manuscripts are the entire book. We're not going to make you do an entire book, but I think looking at specific letters to kind of help us think about some stuff that we could potentially do for a future project would be really helpful. So let's take a look at some stuff. So our first example here is the letter P. Now, it may not be so obvious at the very beginning. You'll see that there's a lot of decoration that goes onto this letter, but it's so highly decorated because it's the first letter of the entire paragraph. So it's deemed incredibly important. And to show that, not only have they added that illuminated gold leaf that we've talked about earlier as part of the reason why they call it illuminated manuscript or illuminated letters, but you'll notice there's some other very intricate detail. A lot of interweaving of these different types of flourishes, these scalloped green edges on the side. There's this red and blue coloring that matches some of the script that's been hand lettered in the page. It's pretty beautiful and very, very shiny. You'll also notice that the base of the letter P is an animal. That's kind of an interesting detail to add. Our next example is the letter S. This one's a little bit more hidden, but if you take a look at this dragon-like creature that's here slithering its body through the frame, you'll notice that this letter S shape looks like it's devouring some other animals, which is a little scary, but it's also being ridden by a man on its back, where he's sitting where the wings are, and these other animals are kind of interlinked and all around. Whether they're all connected to this dragon type critter, I'm not quite sure, but it makes for an interesting way to almost hide the letter within the text. You'll see also that there are some major large details and other fine details that are actually dotted in there or hatched, meaning that they're used with little tiny lines throughout the image as well. And the gold leaf, the shinier part, is just used as a background, which I think is very interesting. Kind of highlights everything and lets this letter S stand out a little bit, even though it's not nearly as obvious as maybe the letter P was. And lastly, we have the letter M. So this one, also not nearly as obvious because it's definitely hidden in the decoration. But you'll notice that the parchment is more of a background than the gold leaf is, for the gold leaf covers a majority of this letter. We'll see it throughout these rings that are across the top that kind of help build the top of the M. They also come down in the straighter parts of the letter, and they're all through these interweavings of these animals and these little like knot-like shapes that are overlapped, almost like a basket weave. We have some really beautiful flourishes on the bottom sides and these other animals that seem to be kind of woven into these areas, including these blue heads with these red ears at the bottom. You'll also notice that there's this kind of little guy here in the very middle center. Very, very interesting. It always has something to do with the text, or at least what the manuscript would have been about. Being that it was medieval times, the books could have been about various religions, wars. It could have also been about maybe the country from where they were from. It was a very popular way in Europe to make these letters very descriptive about what was coming next in the text, and very, very beautiful. So after seeing all these really beautiful examples and seeing how this process works, I think it's really good inspiration for our next assignment. So let's talk more about those details so that we can kind of prepare ourselves, because our schedule is going to look a little different than it has in the last couple of weeks. Not by too much, but it'll give you some time to prepare for the next assignment. So let's talk about the assignment. What is it, the timeline, and the materials that are going to be needed. So our assignment is going to be illuminated letter monograms. We're already familiar now with what an illuminated letter is. We've seen some examples in which they're letters that have been highlighted by some sort of metallic color. Traditionally, it has been gold, but in this case, silver could also be an acceptable option. Also, a monogram. We haven't quite talked about that. Monograms are actually personalizations using the first letter of your name or the first letter of your last name. Maybe you've been in somebody's bathroom where they've had a towel and it has a monogram on it. It might be their initial. Or you've seen a backpack on somebody at school before and it's got somebody's initials stitched into the backpack. Those are monograms. But in this case, we're going to take the letter of either your first name or the first letter of your last name, and we're going to enhance it using some different types of details, much like our examples. And let's get more into what our timeline is going to look like, because that's really important so that you can prepare for this particular project. So our timeline for our illuminated letter unit is going to be a little different than what we're used to. Starting with this week. This week, we're going to learn about illuminated manuscripts. You've already seen the video, and I've got some bonus footage for you at the end here. But what's really interesting is knowing all that information first before we go into the next two parts. The following week, you'll gather all of your supplies, which gives you kind of some extra time, and you'll get to participate in a cool Thanksgiving lesson that Mrs. Witovich has put together for you guys. And then after our break, we'll come back and Mr. Willyerd will have a great lesson on how to create your illuminated monogram. That way, you'll be able to create the letter of your choice using all of the details that he has listed in our lesson. All right, so for your illuminated letter monograms, here are the materials you're going to need. You'll need a 9x12 paper in white or cream. Cream might be a neat color to kind of use just because it'll look a little more like the parchment. We'll have some font and pattern references for handouts that'll come with your next lesson. You'll need a gold metallic Sharpie pen or marker. And I'm going to go ahead and throw silver in there, even though it's not written in it. You'll also need markers and or color pencils. I think both can be really important, or if you like one over the other, we're giving you options. A pencil, of course, and a black Sharpie marker just to be able to outline some things and make them more important or help them to stand out along with your gold metallic Sharpie. Having that to outline some things is always important. That's pretty much it. The Getty Museum does a fabulous job of explaining illuminated manuscripts. Hopefully, that helps you be inspired and you start maybe paying attention to the way letters are written or drawn over the next couple of days, whether it's something you see while reading a book, or whether it's something you see on a show, or if you're in the car and you happen to maybe be driving around somewhere, you'll notice that the way that people write letters is actually very, very interesting. Personally, when I was in junior high school, that was my favorite thing to learn, was lettering and how to make letters really, really interesting. And word art is something that's super popular right now. Even something as simple as like graffiti art on trains. There's a big train that goes through Santan Valley and Queen Creek and Gilbert all the time. And it's always kind of interesting to see some of the things that are written on there because people get very creative. It's very illegal, but some of it's pretty beautiful too. So I'm going to leave you on that note, but gather your materials, and then Mr. Willyerd will come to you in 2 weeks to go over the lesson. Attached to our PowerPoint, I've added a bonus footage of the Burton Bar Library, which is where our chicken friends visited. They have the rare book room. It's actually really cool. I've been on a field trip there once when I was in college, and they had some really amazing stuff. The person that they talked to shares all sorts of things that they have in there. And who knew that you could go to school to be a librarian and learn how all this stuff works? It's really, really cool and really, really interesting. So I'm going to leave you with some bonus footage. I hope you guys have a wonderful Thanksgiving because we'll see you guys after that. We're really thankful for you guys, and we're thankful that you guys hang out with us and do all of our lessons. And I can't wait to see what you guys create next. Have a good one, you guys.